importantly, we got to make sure he's okay inside of the cockpit.
Let's look for some movement. We see some movement from the helmet, and this is good news that Steve is getting out of the car.
Steve, we're extremely happy that you're okay and you hopped out and you still wanted to know if you won the round. Was there any warning?
No, there was no warning. I mean, I felt the thing actually drop the tire or whatever happened and just make a hard left, and then it's just hit the wall and scoot me to the other side. Bottom line, good Lord was looking after me, and hardest thing about the whole deal is my mom and dad coming down here. But, and all my guys, you know, we're family. We got another race car. We're going to get it out and see if we can make it up for the next round. And good Lord looked after us, kept us safe there. Hell, Texas boys, we just keep going.
Big time explosion. That engine has been leveled. Rob Wendlandt is immediately wondering, just like the rest of us, what just happened. Gary McMillan is still inside the cockpit, probably wondering what just hit him in the back of the head like a sledgehammer.
Well, the beginning of the end right there is the car loses traction, so that means the engine is revving up. All of that fuel volume is going into the motor. It's really not designed to rev up beyond 10,000 RPM. It probably did. Now, what took place, whether it was a broken camshaft or something in the valve train, but there was some serious damage done to this engine.
Well, I hear the claps from the New England Dragway faithful that let me know that Terry McMillan has gotten out after this major concussion. Destruction rarely seen in the NHRA. That view takes me back to a major explosion from Doug Herbert at the finals out in Pomona in the late 90s.
Well, you know, you brought up a good point. As volatile as these engines can be, we have to go back a long way. We've had some explosions. Our fans are protected. The driver is very well protected. They can get out and walk away, just like Terry is right now, but the damage is mostly in that motor. So I'm sure
Bruce Allen in the right lane, Kenny Koretsky in the left lane, in one of the most horrific crashes we have ever seen. What happened here, Mike? Well, what happened was Bruce Allen in the right-hand lane got the car a little bit loose, and it moved over towards wall out of the groove. When he went to correct, it was basically with no downforce. It rotated the rear end of that race car around, trying to spin it out. But then when he hits the rubber in the middle of the racetrack, he tips it up on his side. Kenny Koretsky just basically T-bones him in just a horrific accident right there. You can see it. You can hear how violent this crash really was. That's wife Debbie, Bruce's wife, as they headed for the far end of the racetrack. One of the best signs we had was immediately, there's Kenny Koretsky climbing out. Now, they did transport Kenny for observation. He has bumps and bruises. There's Bruce Allen in the light flight helicopter on his way to the hospital.
Like that.
Whoa!
Oh, hang on, Brittany! Brittany's car smokes the tires, gets sideways, crosses the center line, pancaked the left wall, came back across the track, and it has come to a stop down at the far end. The safety safari on the scene. When Terry Haddock smoked the tires, the first thing I thought was no, and moments later, that was the best thing I've seen so far today, because he wasn't there when she came across the racetrack and smacked into the left wall. A crazy ride for Brittany Force in the Monster Energy car. Her mom or dad down on the starting line. The safety safari right there on the scene. And we'll just wait until we get the official word.
2006, at the Thunder Valley Nationals in Bristol, Tennessee, Corey McLenithan and the Fram team learned this lesson firsthand. In the second qualifying session, Corey lines up, hoping to secure a position by laying down his quickest elapsed time of the day. The tree turns green, and Corey launches. But in drag racing, things can change in a heartbeat.
You have those somewhat moments in your lifetime that are just like, holy, I can't believe this is going to happen. This one's going to hurt. So I'm up over 300 miles an hour, well into our run, and the frame breaks in half behind the driver.
At 300 miles an hour, the frame is flexing in multiple directions from the 5G acceleration and 2 tons of downforce generated by the rear wing. Suddenly, it reaches its breaking point. It fractures directly behind the cockpit, triggering an emergency deployment of the parachute.
I go from looking on the track, getting ready to pull the chutes, to looking straight down. All I can see is sparks and everything else, and I knew at that point, I'm in trouble. Chute ripped the car in half, sent me into the wall backwards, and we figured about 122 G impact into the wall backwards.
That may or may not be good, but no pressure. This race, in terms of performance, quite the toss-up. Both these cars well into the low 380s the previous round.
Courtney runs out of steam in the champ. Hammers on with a busted race car. Hold on tight.
Robert's on the brakes right now. You can hear it. A lot of momentum into that sand trap.
So a scary moment for Robert Height. Has problems crossing the finish line. Good news is he climbs out despite a car that slid all the way through the sand trap, went up against the catch net. The question now becomes, will that man, that team, the champions, be able to make it back for the funny car final? The crowd relieving themselves after seeing the video of Robert Height climbing out on the big screen. Not sure what happened. Jimmy Brock's tune-up there. Let's face it, these are 10,000 horsepower cars. Things can and do go wrong with them all the time. It looks like all the safety equipment did exactly as it was supposed to for Robert.
During the course of the run, it appeared that Robert didn't have any issues. It was at the finish line where it didn't seem like there was any warning signs.
No, none.
But the motor lets go. You can see Courtney Forrest, she's out of the race. Left side of your screen, Robert Height right there, right at the finish line. But oddly enough, when it explodes, typically we'll see a backfire. It'll knock the supercharger off, and it'll release the burst panels that are just on the outside of the injector. But this is a very big explosion. No parachute. You know he was on the binders. You can hear the tires squealing. He was right at the limits, because at the point the car starts to bounce, that means he's heavy on the brakes. And Bruno, we talked about this earlier with Tommy Johnson. When the car starts to bounce, all of a sudden you're losing that contact surface with the racetrack. So let's look at Robert. Let's see if we can see anything odd before it explodes.
That is a great point, though, Tony Pedregon. Both Tommy Johnson Jr. and Robert Height found the kitty litter today.
You know, the thing is, usually when the motor explodes right here, it sets off the pressure system, the pan pressure, and it's supposed to throw out those chutes at this point. And it was so late before those chutes came out. He was almost past the 1320 before it looks like the chutes even came out, and only one of them deployed at that point. At that point, it actually never even had a chance to blossom, and it was him grabbing as much handbrake as he could, actually skidding the car into that sand trap where he went all the way up to the net.
Great job of trying to turn the car to scrub some speed here before taking it into the kitty litter. There, that chute finally blossoms, and perhaps the best news ever was Courtney wasn't anywhere around that. Let's take a ride, look, listen, experience what Robert Height went through. But as we said, good news is Robert able to climb out. Robert is now with Amanda.
Robert, you were just talking to your team owner, John Force, and you said you have no clue why it pulled so far to the left when it blew up. What did you experience inside your funny car?
Well, when it blew up, it was almost like it blew a front tire or something, because it made a hard left and the body was kicked up on it. And so the right side of the body where the parachutes were, I couldn't reach them. So I went for them twice. That's why it was so late getting the chutes out. But man, I've never, all I was worried about was where's Courtney? Did not want to hit that advanced car. But I didn't even know we won or anything else.
I'm one of those surprise guys that hasn't won. He's also the defending Traxxas winner.
Oh, big explosion. Jack Beckman just destroyed a Mopar body.
Okay down there, Jack? I'm good.
Great news as you listen to the onboard communications between Jack and his team. He's good. He climbs out okay, but that sedan became a drop-top convertible very, very quickly. Tony, you've been through your fair share of fires and things like that. Didn't look like there was even an inkling of an idea that this was going to happen.
Well, most of the time, 8 times out of 10, it's going to be something in the valve train. What happens is that any debris or any breakage that holds that intake valve open, well, all of that combustion is going back up. It's going to ignite in the intake manifold, and the majority of this looks probably a lot worse than it was. You see Jack Beckman trying to brake. You got the parachutes out. He's doing the right thing, but that body was destroyed. The concussion, Jack will be feeling the effects, and you can see that supercharger come off the car, but fortunately, the NHRA and a lot of these teams have taken measures to really restrain and contain a lot of that damage, and that's probably one of the worst explosions that I've seen in a long time.
Look at that car, pieces and parts. Jack's hands are off right now. He's reaching for a break. You know, Jack Beckman's been through a lot as an Air Force veteran, cancer survivor, and he just went through a big one.
Well, you can see Jack is moving his hands. What he's doing is a conditioned response. He has done this so many times over and over. He knows where the fuel shutoff is. He knows where the brake is. He knows to turn the electronics off on the car. So he's going through all of the motions, and it's sheer instinct that he has conditioned himself to do.
Did the top of that supercharger flip all the way under the car? And where's the manifold? I have never seen an explosion like that.
Well, what's amazing, at all the
right
forces
and
the massive explosion, that none of that debris went into the driver compartment. So to see a guy like Jack Beckman get out of this car is a tribute to all the safety precautions and measures that NHRA has taken and we've evolved.
Oh, hold on. Thank goodness it comes to a stop finally. As John Force exploded a car, that put him in the path of Johnny Lindberg. And from that moment forward and for a long time, simply hold on tight. Good to see some arms flailing underneath the parachute that looks to be shrouded over the top of Johnny Lindberg. Johnny climbs out. Meanwhile, they're attending to John Force right now. Tony Schumacher, I don't know how many times we've held our breath with you in these moments. Memphis comes to mind.
Yeah, that was uncomfortable. This was a big explosion. I couldn't tell if he had any control after it blew off the ground, because that was a big move. It come across, and when it hit Lindbergh's car, when the parachutes get tangled up, man, they're just wrapped up. You got all these monsters with no bodies on them now just pulling each other around with absolutely no control. But, just want to see some movement from Johnny here.
No reason for any speculation. We're going to step away, let the men and women of the NHRA Safety Safari, our first responders, do their due diligence. When we come back, we will update the conditions of both John Force and Johnny Lindberg following a very scary funny car incident round 2 in Arizona. Conscious and alert, the NHRA Safety Safari did take a lengthy amount of time making sure we got the 16-time champ out. He's being transported for observation to a local hospital. Here is why that is. John Force right side, big explosion. And from there, Tony Pedregon just got to ride this one out.
Well, John's hanging on. He's collected Johnny Lindbergh. Grabbed a hold of his parachutes, and John's getting really beat around. Now, there are a lot of safety measures in that chassis. There's a form-fitted seat, but the damage starts early. Take a look at that raw fuel coming out of the pipe right at the step. A second one went out. Now, what John did in the seat was not anything that any other driver wouldn't have done. Take a look at this raw fuel. On the other side, it was a V8 that was transformed into a V6. Now, that puts a lot of stress internally on the parts. Now, what happened was when the engine blew up, the concussion was so big that it turns the car and repositions it, and that is the reason that it goes into Johnny Lindbergh's lane.
Courtney very concerned, Brittany as well. The top end, they were there as the NHRA Safety Safari was extricating John. Don Schumacher, a lot of concern. After all, he is Funny Car's winningest guy.